So a couple days ago, Megan asked me about a particular database column called Program Participant. It was on a table, the customer targeting table, and she wanted to know what it was used for in the application. And I didn't know off the top of my head, but here's how I would find out. And the reason for this video is to maybe talk about some of the desire Greg Kinnear has for improving self-service among PMs, that kind of thing. So the first thing I would do is probably go out to a database and dev using this rmysql command that is part of our environment. This is going to SSH out to a dev server and start a MySQL console. I'm on the DBDB server. This isn't production data, but it's good enough for me to get a sense of the schema. So I'm going to use my favorite database, CEC, and I'm going to describe the table she was talking about, customer targeting settings. And I'm going to find that column she was asking about, program participant. And this is kind of interesting immediately for me because I'm looking at the structure of this table, and it's all tiny ints, which are basically true or false. So this is probably a pretty well-named table, customer targeting settings. It looks like these are a bunch of, it's a bit mask basically, a bunch of yes-nos as to whether or not a customer is an owner or a program participant or a winner spiker. But that's a good clue to start with, but let's see how maybe the application uses that information. So what I'm going to do is search for the use of this program participant column in our code. And I know for a fact that core has all of the database scripts that we use to create the schema and maintain the schema in it. So let's see how the program participant column is used in a DB. Maybe I'll find that it's used in a stored procedure, which wouldn't necessarily show up in our Java code. So I found a bunch of matches in 7 different files. Let's take a look at the first one. This is the stored procedure for set customer segments, which is written quite a long time ago, I believe. This is an IDE I'm in right now called NetBeans, but you could use Eclipse or IntelliJ or a bunch of different ones if you want to sort of check out code and search around. This has got some comments in the top, which tells me that it's basically called to set targeting segments on customers. Here's a super old link to a wiki page back in Positive Energy days, so that's probably not that useful. But what is useful is it's sort of validating this idea that it is a bit mask. It's basically a way to describe a customer with a bunch of ones and zeros. So how else is this column used? It's used in a couple different places. So you don't have to know a ton of SQL to get an idea of how it might be used. You can kind of poke around. That's not that helpful. Tip targeting logic. Here's an interesting hash. So the tip targeting logic table persists the yes, no, or irrelevant logic that the content team defines in the config tool for each targeting attribute. And there's a Jira ticket number for it. So interesting. So maybe this field is used in tip targeting. Let's search not in the DB folder, but let's search in our source main folder, which is where the core Java code is for this flag. And so this is just something that you would learn or know, is that in order to use database fields in our application, it usually gets mapped to a Java object. So I searched for that column and I found it in one location. This class is a class full of constants, which is probably a pretty good idea, so that we don't have to change, if we make a change to a table name or a column name, we don't have to go searching through all of our code everywhere to change it. We just change it in one place. So program participant inside the Java world is actually probably referenced like this, column program participant. So I'm going to redo that search in main, and I'm going to search for column program participant. And cool, so I found it in the customer object, which is probably expected because we're talking about customer targeting settings. So that 1 or 0 gets mapped to this field, program participant, and it's accessible through this method getProgramParticipant, which returns a 1 or 0. There's also a nice comment here. It says there are a bazillion bits in the customer targeting settings table, but we're only currently interested in exposing this 1 bit directly in the customer object. If we become interested in lots of other bits, it will make more sense to create a container pojo that blah, 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 blah. All right, so it's basically telling me that if this customer is in a program, this is going to return me a 1 or 0, but I also see it right here, I also see it right here in this method is in program. which looks like more of a useful business operation. It's returning me a Boolean, yes or no, as opposed to an integer, 1 or 0. And it's null safe, which is nice. So let me go search for is in program. And I'm going to search in core first, but it might not be used in core. It might be used in the report app or EI or something else. Yeah, so I only find it in this one place. So what I want to do is I want to search our whole code base for is in program and see where that's used. I've only got checked out about 10% of our code base over here, so I've got a couple options. My first option is, if I'm a project manager, I might use Fisheye. So I'm going to search for is in program in Fisheye, which indexes our code base, and found 2 references to it. And one of those references is in customer, which we already knew, but here's one in reportlibs generation under print report generator. So let's take a look at that class, print report generator. So here's the customer is in program, and it's basically, here's my comment, each utility customer is pre-characterized into 1 or more segments during initial program setup. For example, a particular customer might be characterized as a homeowner and fireplace and has kids, etc., etc. So this is looking up a program name, and it's returning me a string. So interestingly, what it's doing is it's taking this customer, and if they are in a program at all, it's asking the utility company to look up that program name. So we must be giving names to programs. Like I know just sort of from historical cobwebs that SCE had these programs called set to save. So maybe if the customer had a 1 in that column, that this string being returned from this DAO would say set to save. It's a reasonable guess. But how is this lookup program name actually used? It's also used in this class. It's used, let me see, look up program name right here. Where's the other usage of it? In setup tips. So interestingly, we go get the name of the program for the customer, and then we feed it into this find by name tip object. So it's used to differentiate tips that we might display to the customer. So there can be a default tip, and then there can be a program level override tip. So that's how that field is used in our code.